de la capacité désormais de l'IA de transformer
Is this what digital camera did to
en
films,
image
or
et c'est
Photoshop
signé
did?
work with their own culture, and that will have long-range good and bad consequences that we are just by definition not going to be capable of completely anticipating.
Hello everyone. Is artificial intelligence the death of artists? That's globally the same debate as is photography the death of painting. And rather than focus on that, let's look at what we can do with this new tool at our disposition. This video is an alternative to the very first video of this channel on how to photobash. Everything starts in exactly the same way. First, you have to find out what you want to do, and for that you will need references. Two of the artists that inspire me at the moment are Hicham Abshi and Dao Trongle. And recently I saw some concept of the video game Valorant that I found amazing as well. I'm going to make a quick sketch to lay my foundation, and then we'll be able to talk to the main subject of the video, Midjourney. In the same way that I used photo in the previous video, here we are going to use artificial intelligence to give a basis to our drawing, and that's where it gets interesting because depending on your drawing skill, you can depend more or less on the artificial intelligence. So Midjourney, how it works? It's very simple. You go on their website, you enter your Discord, and you enter the free trial period where you can create up to 25 images. At that time, it was the first time I used this artificial intelligence, and the first thing you'll notice is the work of other people, and it's really impressive. The quality of the image just by writing a sentence is amazing. So it's my turn to try. I wrote a sentence in English, full of conviction, and I realized this is crap. And it's where it gets interesting. I'm going to put some documentation in description, which will allow me to not go in details in this video about how artificial intelligence work. I'm not going to go into the depth of Midjourney simply because other people have already done it and much more efficient way that I could ever do. But to keep it very simple, these comments I'm entering are called prompt, and writing a good prompt is the proper work. So I decided to gather information and to use the gallery to see what others have done. You can do a lot of things in Midjourney, and the first thing I tried just after this fail was to write in the style of Dao Trongle, who is the artist I told you about in my references, and this is starting to be interesting. After having played with the different abilities of the AI for about 2 hours, I take a look at my sketch and I decide to determine the element that I need, as it will be very complicated to have all the elements in one image. So first, I need my foreground floor. Each time what I will do is I'm going to let you know the final results as well as the prompt I enter for it. Midjourney will make you 4 images. Here I enter the comment AR 16:9 to tell the AI that I want a 16:9 format for my final image. And here I'm really shocked by the quality of the image. The atmosphere, the lighting, everything is really good, and I decide that this atmosphere, the very orange golden hour-ish sunset, will be my final look. Let's say I like the image number 4. I can click on V4 to make 4 variations of this image. Then I click on U2, which means upscale image number 2, because I really like this image variation and I would like to see it in a higher resolution. Next, I will need my background with the sky, and I keep a part of my previous prompt for the ground because, as I said, I like the atmosphere and I would like to recover it in this new image for the background. It gives me this great result here, beautiful base to work on. Then I move on to my tree and the kind of raven bird I was drawing in my sketch. I will leave you the image it prompt. I also tried to make a prompt for my main character in the foreground, but I was quite disappointed with it. It turned out it didn't fit in the right posture, so I decided for this character I would draw it completely. And that's it for Midjourney. I will let in the description of the information I collected for you to be able to write prompt you have in mind. As a side note, chat-based AI like ChatGPT for example may help you with this process as well, but that will be on the next video, why not? Time for me to go back to Procreate, and keep in mind that what I'm showing you is not a step-by-step tutorial, and that's why you can do exactly the same thing in Photoshop, Affinity or anything else. As long as you have the ideas, you will always find the tools to realize them. I am importing my images in my Procreate Canva, and then I decide to use the smudge tool to remove the very realistic side of my image and to make them a little more in a painting style. I do it very quickly, but the further away in my image I go, and the faster I'm doing it, because I know that my intention is to blur the background, because I have in mind to have a photographic aspect with a blurred background and a sharp foreground. Then I'm repainting my tree and my bird, and then I can attack the main part of my image, which is going to be the character. For the Valorant player, my character looked like Jet. It was easier for me to start with a character with a lot of references, as it's the case for her, and just modify it enough to become something else while having the influence of the character. First, I'm painting the basic color of her clothes and skin. I try to stay in color that are relatively close to my background, so that everything can blend together easily. Especially since I have an idea in mind, I want to have at the end a really saturated color that will stand out a lot and will direct the composition of my drawing. Then I tried something I've never done before. I told you I really enjoyed this experience of drawing on the iPad, and that's why I went out of my comfort zone. I usually like to do very realistic things with physical rules, whereas here I draw like how I imagine things, how I imagine the folds on the clothes with a freer process without even following the lighting of my scene, because I would like to finish the color, give already details, and only at the end, when it's finished, come back to it and give the lighting of my scene to all of my elements. Looking at the elements individually, I think it works, but if you look at the globality, the whole picture, it's not working at all. The background is very different from the character, bird or tree. It's not a complete image, and it's at this point that, to speed up the process, I decide to go back to Photoshop to do the last editing touch. First, I am making what I call my special effect. I would like my character to have powers. I want the whole thing to be like a Michael Bay movie. So in Photoshop I create a new layer, I double click on it, and I'm making a purple internal and external glow. I'm adding the light of the sun that comes to it, the character and the tree, and before putting too much time on it, I decide to homogenize my image. I don't know if you remember, but on my video on how to photobash, I talked to you about atmospheric perspective, and I invite you to watch this video again so you can go through the whole theory in detail. To make it short, I just make sure that my foreground is more contrasted than my background. So my background will be less contrasted, less saturated, with more color of the sky. And I do this for two reasons. The first one is that it's more realistic, that's how it works in reality, but also it will allow me to use an application called Focos, which is an application I have on my iPad. This application will use artificial intelligence to have the same depth of field of large aperture and very expensive lenses. Concretely, it will try to detect the depth of your image. You select the area that you want in focus and select your aperture. Without going into the theory of photography, but the smaller the value of your aperture is, the more your sensor captures the light, and the more you will have an image with a very small distance of sharpness and much more blur than if you have a very large aperture value. I decide to go with a very low aperture value, which corresponds to a very large opening of my sensor. I know it's a little bit confusing, but just remember that what I want is a lot of blur, and I want bokeh, which are these artifacts that you can have in very large aperture lenses on very strong light points. The only drawback of this software is that in order to have your image at a higher resolution, you will have to pay for it. I also had this idea of adding smoke in the foreground, mostly to hide part of the ground, but also to be able to direct the eyes of the spectator. You see how with the smoke and then the power that make a line that go first to the character, then to the bird, and globally to all the main element of the image. I had a little blur on the farthest branches of my tree, so that it can integrate them with the blurred background. And to finish, as usual, I use camera raw to make the last editing of color, brightness and contrast. And that's it, my drawing is done. To go back on the artificial intelligence subject and the deaf or artist, every time you are hearing this kind of shocking title, ask yourself a few questions. Of course it will come with downside, that's for sure. Yeah, we can have doubt like, is it even useful to learn how to draw when you can make in one prompt amazing picture? But I think instead of thinking like that, I choose to see the amazing part of it. It's a new tool and that brings creation accessible to everyone. And in my case, it's very useful to bring me new ideas and inspiration. In every case, don't forget that a tool is just a tool, and the only thing that matters are your ideas. Take care of yourself and see you in the next video.